video will explore tropical dry forest primary succession around Masaya Volcano in Nicaragua. Primary succession is a series of ecological and environmental processes by which a new surface, such as a lava flow, is gradually colonized by vegetation. Studies of primary succession explore how this bare surface becomes transformed into a forest over thousands of years. First, we'll go to the most recent lava flow of 1772. This open lava field appears barren, but if you look closely there are signs of life. Tillandsia, an air plant that usually grows on trees, has established itself here. Similarly, a plumeria seedling is emerging from a crevice that provides shelter and moisture during the rainy season. Eventually, it will grow to a mature tree, standing many meters tall. But where do these seedlings come from? Plumeria seeds might have been blown in by the wind from nearby plants. For other primary colonizers, such as the fig, we will have to look more closely at the nearby forest. Here, green parakeets feast on ripe figs. The flesh of the fruit will provide them with nutrients, but the fig seeds will pass through their digestive systems. When the parakeets fly between the forest patches that they feed on, the seeds will be spread in their droppings. In turn, mature trees will be used as a perch by other birds, whose droppings might spread seeds from different plant species. Bats are often found roosting in lava tubes. These are tunnels that were formed when molten lava was flowing. Many bats at Masaya are fruit and nectar feeding, which facilitates colonization. Primary colonizer trees provide a surface on which epiphytic orchids can grow. Like the Tillandsia, they collect nutrients from the air. Through time, leaf litter and organic matter falls to the ground from the trees and the epiphytes. These primary colonizers are therefore important as they create patches where succession can continue. On the borders of recent lava flows, gradually species will spread in from the forest onto the nearby lava, such as this vine. Leaves and other organic matter from plants growing on the lava, along with some that might have blown in from the nearby forest, will decompose, and this begins soil formation. Trees are now becoming established across the lava flow. Their canopy provides a structure on which vines can grow. A greater variety of epiphytic plants can now be found. And on the ground, Bromelia penguin, which is in the same family as the Tillandsia, will now start growing on early soils that are formed on the lava surface. Through succession, species diversity increases, and typical dry forest species such as Trachoma stans, with its characteristic yellow flowers, can now be found. In the established forest of Ceratosa, few primary colonizer plants are found, as the environmental conditions no longer suit them. A denser canopy of trees has developed. These reach tens of meters high. They produce a thick leaf litter layer, and insects will feast on fallen fruit. Additionally, there is now a distinct understory, in which shade-tolerant species such as Aphelandra are found. These understory plants provide a food source for other insects, such as this giant red-winged grasshopper. This is in fact the nymph, and it lives in groups. They feed on foliage, to eventually grow to become one of the largest grasshoppers in the world. On the forest floor, a trail of ants moves through. These leafcutter ants travel through the forest to collect leaves, as well as other plant parts such as stems. They bring these back to their nest, but the ants don't actually eat them. They feed these plant parts to a fungus that they cultivate, and this ant-fungus relationship is known as mutualism. In openings in the canopy, butterflies nectar on flowers. They play an essential role in pollinating the plants of this ecosystem. Different butterflies are attracted to different flowers, often depending on their colour. The butterfly benefits from a nectar reward and will transfer pollen to the next flower it visits. This is another example of mutualism. Scientists and volunteers have been studying butterflies in Masaya's tropical dry forest to understand how their distribution links with the different stages of primary succession. Butterflies are useful ecological indicator species. Firstly, they rely on the vegetation for host plants for their larvae. Many adult butterflies feed on nectar and in return will provide pollination. Butterflies are useful to study because they are sensitive to climatic conditions and will occupy distinct shade or sun-tolerant niches. They also provide a food source for consumers further up the food chain. Therefore, it is possible to characterize stages of succession based on butterfly communities. Some butterflies won't feed on flowers, but collect nutrients using specialized behavior known as mud puddling. On moist surfaces, they will use their proboscis to collect nutrients such as salts and amino acids. By observing the behavior of different butterfly species, we can develop a better understanding of how they interact with their environment. This sapranthus tree grows flowers on its trunk, and this is known as cauliflory. It is well known that flies are attracted to the smell of death and decay, and the sapranthus flowers emit a pungent decaying aroma to attract the flies that pollinate them. Reptiles such as this young iguana might now be found in this environment. In the morning, they find openings in the forest to bask in the sun to warm up their cold blood. They will return to more forested areas to seek food and keep away from predators later in the day. As they mature, iguanas turn from green to brown, and they can grow over a meter long. Yellow-headed geckos and whiptail lizards, amongst other reptiles, can be found as the succession continues. They forage for insects, which make up most of their diet. However, they themselves can become prey. A colubrid snake has caught a lizard. There are many different species of snake at Masaya, including some rarely seen venomous snakes and constrictors. Insects, as well as smaller reptiles, are also a food source for some birds, including the motmot, Nicaragua's national bird. Tropical dry forest at Masaya is also home to one of the last remaining populations of white-faced capuchins on the Nicaraguan Pacific. They eat mostly fruit and insects, but their varied diet can also include birds, eggs, lizards, and other small mammals. At Masaya, it is also possible to find the Mexican tree porcupine. This is a docile animal, and it comes out mostly at night to feed on fruit and leaves. It has few predators, thanks to its sharp quills. Squirrels are also common in late succession forests. For all these mammals, trees are an important part of their habitat, and they require a variety of plants and animals to feed on that can only be found later in the succession. Beyond the park boundaries, tropical dry forests might again be different and have streams running for at least part of the year. At a perennial stream at the nearby Apoyo Lake, there is frog spawn in a pool of slow-flowing water. These will eventually grow into tadpoles before becoming frogs. On a rock in the stream, a spider waits. At the water's edge, butterflies and wasps are mud puddling. Here, larger butterflies such as the caligo or morpho, typical climax forest species, might be found. Apoyo is also a suitable environment for dragonflies, fewer of which are seen under the drier conditions at Masaya. Up in the trees, howler monkeys can also be found in this climax community. These are well known for their loud howls that they use to communicate their territory to other troops. They are foliivores, meaning that their diet consists mostly of leaves and other plant parts such as fruit and buds. They move slowly through the forest in troops of 20 or so to eat leaves from a variety of different species, as some contain toxins that can poison them if too much is eaten in one sitting. In the afternoon, they like to rest up in the treetops, although the young can be much more active. At the nearby Apoyo Lake, higher humidity probably facilitates the presence of many of these species and the development of this particular climax forest. Whilst there might not be perennial streams at Masaya, there are also other reasons explaining some of the differences in ecological communities here. Masaya is a persistently degassing volcano, and it emits several hundred tons of sulfur dioxide a day. Scientists and volunteers use gravity meters to study the volcano. By detecting small changes in gravity, it is possible to infer the dynamics of the magma chamber. This requires having measurements over many years from different locations across the volcano. Gravity measurements are important in contributing to our understanding of the processes behind volcanic degassing, and therefore are essential to forecasting how degassing and its impacts might change in the future. Trade winds blow Masaya's toxic plume in a southwesterly direction. So, for the next part, we will head downwind to look in more detail at the gases and their ecological impacts. The ecosystem under the plume is highly polluted with volcanic gases. Here, a few trees, grasses and bromeliads are able to survive. The gases have modified the normal path of succession. a shrubby transition zone, joins this grassland with established forest away from the area impacted by the plume. These Annies, however, seem to be tolerant of volcanic degassing. Other scientists are making measurements of volcanic degassing. Diffusion tubes are used to measure volcanic gases in the atmosphere, such as sulfur dioxide and chlorine gas. These are attached to trees for several weeks. Sulfation plates are also exposed to measure the rate at which these gases are being deposited. This environmental data is then linked to the plant communities growing downwind. Very few studies have looked at the ecological impacts of volcanic degassing, so it is important to understand this because it could be applied to other volcanoes or future industrial pollution. Near the crater, volcanic gas levels are extremely high, and the ground receives regular sprinklings of ash. There are no plants growing for several hundred meters, so it seems unlikely that anything would survive here. Wearing a gas mask for protection, an entomologist observes the ground. She is looking for bees, who choose to make their nests in the ash at the crater rim. Although it appears inhospitable, this habitat has its advantages. There are fewer predators here. Additionally, the ash here is an ideal substrate to support the network of tunnels building their nests. They then have to fly hundreds of meters away to seek out nectar. When they are gone, velvet ants search for the bees' nests where they lay their eggs, just like a cuckoo. By catching specimens, it was possible to identify this species of ground-nesting bee, and it's the first time it's been seen in Nicaragua. The biggest driver of change to tropical dry forest around Masaya has been human settlement and agriculture. Forest is cut down for crops such as bananas, beans, and coffee. Livestock affects the vegetation by grazing, and this can have knock-on impacts across the ecosystem, not just affecting the plants that they graze on. Coprophagous butterflies are those that feed on excrement, and these might be favoured over other species. People might also build water troughs for their livestock or to wash clothes, which might benefit some species that otherwise might not survive the dry season. We have seen that the process of primary succession takes us from a barren lava flow to a species-rich forest over hundreds and thousands of years. However, environmental factors such as moisture availability, volcanic degassing, and human activity all produce different ecosystems deviating from this model. It is these different environmental pressures that allow for such great natural diversity.